If you're interested in decoding the complexities of China's national security outlook and its military modernization, check out Takshashila's latest expert capsule course offering China's defense in the new era. Visit school.takshashila.org.in and enroll in the course today.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of All Things Policy. I'm your host for today, Kripa Koshy, and I'm a staff program manager here at Takshashila. Joining me today, actually, is a very special guest who has a fairly comprehensive, although he might hesitate to agree, and intimate knowledge of the great river Brahmaputra. So joining me today is Mr. Sanjoy Hazarka. Welcome, sir. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So our conversation today, I'm hoping, is going to cover at a fairly high level, though, some of the most pressing contemporary issues that are related to the vast Brahmaputra River as we know it, and perhaps touch on some of the notes that policymakers can be taking to better respond to some of these issues. So before we jump into our discussion, I am going to formally introduce our guest. So for many, Mr. Hazarka is a familiar name, but I am going to take the time to introduce some of his extensive work actually in this space. So Mr. Hazarka is an author, journalist, filmmaker, policy analyst, and a human rights advocate. He's a former New York Times correspondent and has reported widely across South Asia for over 4 decades, and currently is a columnist for The Telegraph and The Tribune. He's the author of 5 books, including the acclaimed Strangers of the Mist, which presented really a path-breaking narrative on the Northeast region, as well as Strangers No More, his work that actually was published 2 decades later, which gave a more contemporary examination of the unique challenges in the region. In 2000, Mr. Hazarka founded the Center for Northeast Studies and Policy Research, whose boat clinics in particular bring healthcare to nearly 3 lakh people annually on the Brahmaputra, if not more. He's also the recipient of the Rotary Peace Award for Writing in 2023, and he has held fellowships at Harvard, Tufts, the Rockefeller Center, and other institutions, and has also served as the International Director for the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative from 2016 to 2022. His latest book, which is going to be the scope of some of our discussion today, called The River Traveler, Journeys on the Brahmaputra from Tibet to the Bay of Bengal, was released earlier this month, and his forthcoming work includes a book, hopefully on Mizoram for 2026. So his most recent book, as I just alluded to, is documenting one of the world's longest and widest rivers. The volume of the water actually that flows in it is as valuable as the silt it brings, which supports really entire civilizations and agrarian systems. For those who are more geographically inclined, you may already know that the Brahmaputra flows through Tibet, enters India through Arunachal Pradesh, and flows through Assam and Bangladesh before it joins the Bay of Bengal. As someone who's actually known the river fairly intimately all his life, Mr. Hazarka brings a journalist's eye for reportage and a writer's sensibility as well, because he's describing his travels along the river, of course, but also is trying to recount the historical burden that this body of water faces. I'm just going to lead us into some of our questions since we have maybe not too much time together today. Mr. Hazarka, you've extensively documented your observations and learnings from this river, so really it's a pleasure to be in discussion with you, especially talking about this mighty and moody Brahmaputra as you've talked about it frequently. I just said, that we know this river runs through India, Bangladesh, and Tibet. But I think my question to you is, what do you see as these unique challenges that have emerged because of the river's transboundary existence, perhaps even beginning with some of the contemporary challenges springing from its origin in Tibet?
Well, thank you, Kripa, for a long introduction and for having me on the show.
Of course.
There are many complex interwoven issues and narratives as far as the Brahmaputra is concerned, the Sangpo Brahmaputra. For one, it is a transnational river that flows, as you said, through 3 countries. But none of the countries have any agreement on how to either share the river's waters or how to use the waters. And each country is literally doing its own thing. Therefore, China is building dams on the Brahmaputra, including the monster dam at the great Sangpo Bend, the Namcha Barwa Bend, the gorges, in the gorges. India is building a counter and has been building many dams, not just on the river when it as it debouches from the Tibet highlands and plateau into Arunachal and its many other tributaries of the Brahmaputra. There are many tributaries that flow into it in India, some from Tibet, others originate elsewhere. So, and Bangladesh is always complaining about how it gets the short end of the stick, as it were, whether it's in relation to Ganges waters or the flow of the Brahmaputra. There has been a process of information sharing of meteorological data, that's water velocity, water flow data between the Chinese who run Tibet and the Indian government now for many years. But that was stalled for a little bit, and I understand it's resumed. But there are these many complexities which are heightened by the constant human ingress and interventions into the ecospace of the river, whether it's in Tibet. And when I mean ecospace, I'm not just talking about the water flows, I'm talking about the physical environment around it. So now you have major highways and railways which have been built in Tibet and continue to be built, which are affecting the permafrost below the surface of the earth in many ways we cannot fathom because independent surveys are not allowed and the Chinese do not share much information of this. The second is that similar infrastructure, whether it's railways or bridges and roads, are coming up, obviously in Assam and Arunachal Pradesh, to bridge, shall we say, the last mile and connectivity, create connectivity improvement, make life easier for people living not just along the river but on either side, on either bank, far from it. So these are the issues which concern, and the river is also suffering a lot from other kinds of human intervention, which you will see in towns and cities like Guwahati and to a lesser degree in Upper Assam, but certainly in Bangladesh and so on, which is the dumping of untreated waste,
Waste.
human
Yeah.
and industrial or agricultural waste into the river, which is affecting many things, not just the fish populations, which are diminishing, but also the dolphins, which are the major riverine species. You know, the health of a river or of a land is determined by the great species which dominate these entities.
Yes. Yeah.
For the river, it is the dolphin, and for the land, of course, in India, it's the tiger and the elephant. These are things which are of deep concern to people like me as I've traveled along the river. And the challenging and sad part about it is that ordinary people don't seem to have much say in the matter.
Right.
Decisions are taken by people in Delhi and in state capitals without consulting the people who know better, who are, because they're in the field, they're facing the brunt of the issues, whether it is floods or anything else for the last many hundreds of years. And they have an innate understanding of the science and the flow of the river and its tributaries, its companion, as no other people do.
Yeah, I completely hear what you're saying. And in fact, I was hoping to build on, the last point there of the human impact of some of this, right? That there are communities that are very directly impacted by the health of the river itself. And I wanted to touch, I think, specifically on those who are those who live on some of the temporary islands that are formed by the river. So the Sepoys are home, we know, to nearly a tenth of Assam's population of about 35 million. So I'm just curious to know, in your view, what would you say are maybe two or three of the most, pressing issues that this particular population might face on this type of geography?
Well, it's less than a tenth. It's about 1/8.
1/8,
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, does that make it a bit more? It's not 1/10. It's 1/12 or so. Sorry. Yeah.
Mm.
See, not all the islands are temporary. A majority of them are, and they get eroded and rebuilt with each major flow and
Mm.
surge of floods. And
Yeah.
sometimes they get submerged and emerge elsewhere downstream, or a part of it emerges elsewhere downstream, and part of it just vanishes and flows on, perhaps to the Bay of Bengal, or gets deposited on the way. And what many people forget is that these are people who have lived on these islands for generations,
Mm.
perhaps in some cases for hundreds of years,
Right.
as in the case of Majuli, which has been a settled space, which was the largest river island in the world. Now, the peculiar challenges that they face are obviously of flooding and during the rainy season, which is becoming a bit erratic because of global warming, climate changes. And I think one of the main issues is the unpredictability of seasons.
Mm.
Therefore, I've traveled very extensively in Assam along the Brahmaputra and its tributaries, and I've met many people who have very different views about on the islands, who have very different views about how this is affecting them.
Mm.
For instance, I remember one villager talking about, well, last year he was talking about an earlier time, a couple of years ago when I was there. He says, last year the rains came late, so I lost my crop. He was talking about the rice crop.
Yes. Yeah.
This year it's come early, so I've lost the rice crop, and we don't know what to do. So that people have a sense of helplessness, so they are adapting. The famous words of adapting,
Mm.
adaptation and mitigation. People are often left to their own devices because the information that the government is holding to itself does not reach ordinary people. It
Mm.
does not seem to percolate because the government and scientists need to speak a language that people understand. They need to have information that they can share, that people can understand in the
Mm.
language that they speak, read, and hear, and see.
Absolutely.
These four key senses. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that it is really important that we try and understand that gap,
Mm.
because without it, we will not get real, shall we say, adaptation or mitigation of the problem.
Sure.
The dry season in some places have become longer, sometimes by longer, even by a week or a month or so. There are these very creative communities, energetic communities on the shores, on these
Mm.
sandbars, these islands, who use that opportunity to grow other crops. So if you go
Or
to
that have shorter
yeah,
harvest cycles, I
yeah, so
imagine.
which
Yeah.
have a shorter harvest cycle. So now I've been noticing chilies are growing
Mm.
next to maize, which is a crop for not just people but also community, the
Mm.
animals, which is growing maybe next to the sugarcane belt. Then you have cauliflower and brinjal. So it's multi-cropping
Mm.
on a micro scale on an extensive level.
Right.
So people are using whatever skills and life skills and knowledge skills that they have without too much assistance from the government
Mm.
on adapting. And the main thing about adaptation is that many are leaving.
Right. I was going to say migration also seems like a viable option suddenly. Yeah. Or not suddenly.
Well, it's not really that viable because it becomes a remittance economy.
Right.
And suppose you lose your job or you return home, what happens to the family then? Because you don't have then the skills which would enable a permanent job perhaps are not there, and education and health issues are major concerns in all
Of
these
course. Of
areas.
course. Hmm.
There are no roads there, so you have to move. There's no public transport. You move from one place to another either on foot or on motorcycle is a
Hmm.
preferred way, and by boat if you go from one place to the
Right.
mainland or to other islands.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I can imagine that. I mean, we it seems like we truly are touching some of the tip of the iceberg on some of this, and there are, of course,
Kripa, it's a different universe. When you
yeah.
go there, you don't feel you're on an island, unless you see the
Mm,
river. Uh,
no.
you feel you're on a mainland. Some of these islands are so large.
Right. Yeah. Of course, like you were saying, if generational settlements have happened there, I can truly appreciate that. Yeah, the land itself is one that is able to host larger populations as well. Yeah. I think I wanted to maybe slightly turn our conversation to something else you had mentioned previously, Mr. Hazarka, about particularly the environmental concerns, right? So you spoke of sewage dumping that's happening extensively and the downstream impact of that. So maybe I think my question is if you could touch on some of the tension that actually exists between, greater infrastructural development that's happening in the Northeast, as well as then the health of the river and its dependent communities. So I just wanted a little more, give you some space to explore that topic a little more.
Yeah, I think that among the issues that impact the river and the communities that depend on it are human interventions, not just in terms of garbage dumping and so on, but also on the fact that you have these massive infrastructure projects which are coming up
Hmm.
with very little consultation of communities. I mean, I guess they are benefiting from it to some degree, but one is not really sure.
Yeah.
So you have numerous bridges which are coming up across the Brahmaputra, all good, all adding to connectivity.
Hmm.
But bridges also change the flow of the river or of the channels, They
Hmm.
accumulate silt at various points. Um, some places are deeper than others because of the nature of the flow. I mean, during the high season, the flood season, the river levels go up several meters. So you
Right.
can imagine the force of the river, the force of
Mm,
the current, and the amount of silt and sediment it's bringing down. So all that has an impact. That's one. The second thing is with regard to burgeoning urban populations.
mm,
Uh, People are increasingly not seeing the river as a friend and an ally,
mm,
as perhaps in earlier times.
mm.
Now it's just a kind of barrier to be
Tamed in some way.
crossed, an issue which is not as significant as it was earlier,
Mm,
because it can be spanned. I mean, even Majuli, the river, what the greatest river island, they're building a bridge to the island. I mean, how
mm,
can an island remain an island if it is now connected by land? And as far as the other side towards Upper Assam and Arunachal is concerned, it uh, in the dry season that the other channel of the Brahmaputra dries up, so you can actually
mm,
cross it. So there are many changes like this taking place.
mm, mm.
There are efforts also to use these various flood prevention interventions,
Right.
measures, these geobags and so on, to ensure that the river doesn't burst its banks and so on. But one of the key problems, in my view, is the perception of the flood engineers who have to deal with the challenges.
Mm,
Because if you, as I did, if you trawl through the archives and the records of the flood department, you'll find that it is being seen as this enemy which is advancing towards your citizen
mm.
with
Wow.
various. The enemy is like has made the first breach. The second wave is coming of.
Mm,
It's literally like that in some of the older writings and
wow.
reports. So that's a very strongly embedded thing, and
Mm,
I'm really not in favor of the crisscrossing of dams to building of dams to block river. A river needs to have a basic minimum flow.
mm,
That is,
mm.
it's right. And without that basic minimum flow, you cannot have fish that feeds people or uh, the aquatic life of the river. You can't have uh, enough space for the dolphins to flow because the river is getting shallower. I mean, as it
Mm.
spreads,
And wider, yeah,
it
as you were
becomes
saying.
wider. The deposit of silt spreads over a larger area, therefore
Yes.
increasing the height of the riverbed, not
Mm,
which
mm,
was already risen by the great earthquake of 1950 by several feet.
mm, mm.
So there are the unprepared exigencies which are always on the waiting to happen.
Right. Yeah,
Like
I can
like an
understand.
earthquake, a major earthquake, or
Oh,
a major disaster like that.
yeah. So actually, then in light of that, if I may interrupt, I may.
Let me add a couple of more points.
Oh, sure. Please,
Eh,
please go
In many places, you see there are new industries coming up near the river, near the banks of tributaries, and they are just not treating their effluent as it
ahead.
goes into the river. So I think there's a much harder look at management of effluent disposal, which the pollution boards, both at the state and the central levels,
Mm-hmm.
need to do. Quite apart from daily waste and household waste, which
Management,
goes
right.
into the river. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So actually, my question ties well, I think, in what you've just sort of discussed. Um, what could nimble policymaking look like for a landscape that's so dynamic and has these, ever unraveling sort of complexities for each of the challenges that you've identified?
Well, I don't think if there is anything called nimble policymaking.
Maybe I'm being a
By
bit
its
optimistic.
definition, policy is not nimble; it's sort of set in stone. No,
Mm,
um, I think you need to be equally dynamic or equally understanding that one needs to, go with the flow or move
mm,
with the flow. The river is a
that's
very dynamic entity, and one
right.
needs to see it as that. It doesn't sort of stay. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a bit and wait for you to catch up with me. It
Catch up,
just keeps
right?
flowing. The river flows on. It goes without respecting national or international boundaries or district boundaries from
Sure.
one country to another, from one state to another. So, you cannot say that, okay, we'll build a dam here and to heck with the consequences downstream.
Mm,
I mean, you have what's called a lower riparian. We are lower riparians to Tibet, China, the Tibet Autonomous Region. Bangladesh is a lower riparian of India's, whether it's for Tista water, Ganga water, or for the flows of the Brahmaputra and the Barak, Meghna. So all these issues need a lot of conversation because you cannot define policy in a vacuum, especially in a very complex river system in a basin that spans not one state but several countries. you know It is illogical to think of policy making as something you do for a state or for a country.
Mm.
It is a basin that matters. So, what the Chinese are doing in Tibet has an impact on us. What we are doing in Assam and Arunachal has an impact downstream in Bangladesh. What Bangladesh does has an impact on the Bay of Bengal. So, it's all
Mm.
interconnected. And frankly, we do not have the perception among either the political leadership, and have not for many years, over the decades, in fact, or among our scientists and bureaucrats to envision this, because people just don't have conversations with
Mm.
others who may have either traveled on these routes or
Right.
looked at history, or who have a better understanding, consult local communities. There is the lack of that which is really impacting all of us.
Mm.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that nimble policymaking does not happen uh, in a rush. It does not happen because we want it to happen. It happens because we try and take a broader view of things and take a
Mm.
dive into the issues, looking at different aspects from the perspectives of those who are either beneficiaries or otherwise impacted by the risk.
Dependent on. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's an absolutely a fair assessment of trying to revisit, like, what are some of the core objectives we're trying to achieve here? Who really are the stakeholders in some of this? I think these are good questions to always sort of keep in mind when.
Principal stakeholder may be the government. The
Mm.
equal stakeholders are the communities who live on
Mm.
the banks, on the river, on the islands,
Mm.
on either bank of the river, because they are the people who are impacted.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it's an important clarification to sort of make as well. I am going to maybe guide us to maybe our last question in our time together, which is, as I was going through Strangers No More, I mean, of course, we are discussing, of course, river travel and some of the topics you've touched on there at a high level. But in Strangers No More, in passing, you make this mention that, exploring the Brahmaputra remains this incomplete challenge for you. So I guess I'm just wondering, do you feel like it holds true still? You've done extensive research now for your current book. And if yes, it still holds true, then what do you feel remains to be explored of the river?
And exploration is never complete, Kripa.
Never ending. That's right.
Especially if it's something you're passionate about and you feel deeply for, and you want to give the time to it that it needs. I mean, the book is only a part of the journey.
Mm.
The journey continues because we have so much to learn from the river, from the people who live alongside it, who use it. Because I often think we forget that the river is an entity.
Mm.
It flows, and it's seen really the ebb and fall of many empires and cultures, the
It's
growth
very
of
true.
many things. It's been silent witness to many things that have happened, which we record in our history books or learn from our forefathers or discover as we go along.
Mm.
But it still holds many secrets and many things in store. So it's always good to go into, not into the field, but on a boat, one of the most relaxing journeys anywhere in
Mm.
the world, and just, you know, talk to people, break bread with them, eat fish with them, see the river, look at the many life systems that it supports. And on a calm day, you see the sky and the water merging. I mean, there is no greater beauty
Mm.
than that.
That's a beautiful image.
So, yeah, there is always so much to learn, and so many communities about whom I don't know enough and whose languages I cannot speak. But
Mm.
there is always so much to be done and to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally see that. And I think, I mean, at the very least, I'm really pleased that we covered some of the ground of reconceptualizing how we even speak of and see the river. And that rather than seeing it, like you said, perhaps as this enemy to be tamed or contained, but rather seeing it as a source of livelihood at the very least of life, and for so many. And the hope is that it remains and can stay at the strength that it is, as it is now, for years to come, even as we know that some of the landscape and the characteristics of the river we know are changing. But I think having these conversations is important to not have it be seen as just a resource to be exploited or used, right? But rather, like you mentioned, an entity that can be relied on and seen as a friend. We just simply, in the interest of time, don't have time to explore even further into some of these topics. Although I know that a half an hour conversation cannot do justice to some of the themes that we've covered today. I do want to conclude by thanking you so much for your time, Mr. Hazarika. A real pleasure. And I hope that this is an encouragement to those who are listening as well to take the opportunity to pick up a copy of this book to be able to do a bit of a deep dive into some of the topics that we've explored today. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Hazarika.
Thank you, Kripa, and I thank the Takshashila Dispatch for this interview, and thank you for plugging the book. I do hope people who are listening will get it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.